Okay, so next up we're going to talk about dynamic instantiation, and this is a bit of a cryptic idea because what happens is the thing that gets injected is something called an auto-generated factory. Now, what's an auto-generated factory? Well, let me explain to you what the problem is. So let's suppose that you need to specify certain ways of constructing your object. Typically, the way you do it, if you have, let's say, property injection, for example, is you would write a register function which would take some sort of lambda which would perform all the kind of initializations that you need, and this is okay. However, this tightly couples you to the fact that this is all being done in AutoFac. So what dynamic instantiation lets you do is it allows you to resolve something within your component, like within your, for example, car if you want an engine, but without calling any AutoFac APIs, which means that instead of calling, for example, something like register and then using a lambda which takes the context and says context.resolve, for example, you do something completely different, because what you do is you inject and store a component as a function that returns a type T. So just to go through the motions here, what happens later after you store this component somewhere is you can call my field with just empty round brackets to construct obviously not just the type T, but the type T with all the dependencies initialized. And you'll notice that we're calling this function instead of calling some sort of explicit resolve kind of construct. And as a consequence of that, what this means is that if you decide to abandon AutoFac and start doing something else, you can do it without, paying too high of a price effectively, because you're still calling a .NET func of T. You're not calling context.resolve of T or anything AutoFac specific. So this is the benefit here. Now, this approach with func of T, it still respects lifetime scopes. So what this means is that if you specify something as a singleton, as you call this particular function multiple times, you still get the same object. Alright, so I'm going to spice up this example by introducing the SMS log. Now remember, the SMS log is something that takes a parameter, but you'll notice that as I register type for SMS log, I'm not going to provide that parameter here. I'm simply not, because we're going to be providing those parameters right inside the reporting component. So now the reporting component has to rely on more than just a single log. It has to rely on both of these logs as well, and that's okay. That's just fine. I'll just add another log. So let's rename this one to console log like so, and change this as well. And in addition, I will have a SMS log, except that we're not going to be using owned anymore. We're going to be using something completely different. So let me actually get rid of all of this because it's just too complicated. So first of all, I'll have a func which returns a console log. So we're going to be using the func type. So this is console log, and we're going to start by having just the console log. We'll add the SMS log later, and then of course I'll do C*F once again to initialize it in the constructor. Okay, so I'll have once again a reporting method of some kind. Let's call it report, and inside this reporting method I'm going to just get the console log. So how do you get it? Well, if you're using a func, if you're injecting it as a func, then you need to invoke this function to actually cause the object to be created. So you have console log, but it's a function, so you put the round brackets here to actually invoke it, and then you can use the right method. So I'm going to say reporting to console, and I'll duplicate this, and I will add yet another line. So I'll say and again, and we'll see how all of this actually goes. So jumping down here, we resolve the reporting component, and then I'll jump back to using the report. Okay, so we've got our setup, and we can now execute this and see what the end result is. Hooray! So as you can see, we create two console logs. Notice there are two of them, so it's not a singleton any time in which you actually trigger the function, where the function is. Let me just close this down for a moment. So if we go into report, every time that you call one of these, you're getting a brand new instance of console log. So the function basically specifies, please use the container to resolve me a brand new console log with whatever lifetime it's been defined. In this case, it's instance per request, so that's why we get one per each request. Okay, so coming back to this, we make both of the console logs. we report to the console. You'll notice first we create the first log and report it to the console, and then we do the second one and report it. And of course, at the end, since they're both disposable, they are both cleaned up. Now, what about the SMS log, the one that takes an argument? Well, that's what we're going to see in just a moment.